Hello and welcome to this Wednesday's morning market briefing. We've got lots to talk about, but firstly, Israel's government meets, and this comes as Joe Biden says Hamas hostage deal is close, as well as that Jeremy Hunt to reveal £9 billion a year, £9 billion a year, a permanent tax break for businesses in the autumn statement today. As well as that, we do have lots happening on the charts, also with lots happening on the economic calendar, but we'll come to that near the end, so make sure you stay around to see that. Before we get straight into it, make sure to subscribe. But the first article to talk about, of course, is Joe Biden and Israel. Now, according to Joe Biden, a deal between Hamas and Israel is very close. Now, this is expected to free dozens of civilian hostages held in Gaza in return for Palestinian prisoners. So these are, prisoners taken by Israel into Israeli prisons. Now, intensive deals have been brokered in negotiations for weeks and are now, according to officials, very close to completion. Now, this is a topic that we've been covering to a great extent, in general, in relation to the war, largely in its relation to, the rising global tensions and the risks of a global conflict. Well, not so much a global conflict, but a regional conflict, especially in relation to, the border clashes that we've been seeing in Lebanon and the risks of a spillover war, which would affect the world oil supply, as well as, just the region as a whole, affecting global economics, which would bring down stocks, push oil higher, and likely push oil higher as well. And this comes as, obviously, we are already dealing with that kind of cost of living crisis. So this is why this is such an important topic to keep note of, because we have had predictions already that a regional escalation in relation to this war could even drive prices for oil to $150 a barrel for oil, which is close to double the current prices. We'll come to oil near the end on the chart, so make sure you stay around till you see that. But this is why we're focusing in on this topic so much, and the war has continued to rage following the October 7th massacre by Hamas as they stormed into Israel and massacred civilians in the thousands. Now, this deal is being brokered by Qatar, with Netanyahu telling troops that I'll hope we have some good news soon. So, kind of making that morale boosting comment in relation to hostages likely being released. Now, Israeli security and war cabinets will convene by for an entire government vote on the potential release of Palestinian prisoners. Now, we know that we've heard more right-wing, figures within the Israeli parliament, which kind of don't really look to negotiate with these groups such as Hamas, and more so look to a military kind of reaction to these hostage-taking individuals. And as a result, it's a question of whether this vote will be passed. We know there's been, public uprising and public movement within Israel in relation to the release of hostages. So many, many individuals within Israel, very pro-Israeli Israelis, and these individuals have been marching for the release of those hostages. Increased pressure for Netanyahu to focus on the release of hostages over wiping out Hamas, which of course is Israel's goal within this war. Now, Netanyahu, however, did state that they would continue this war until Hamas is destroyed, and obviously this comes at a cost, that being not only the civilian casualty side and the Israeli soldier casualty side, but also it comes at a political cost of not really having the leverage to be able to negotiate with Hamas for hostages. After all, if Hamas know that day by day they're going to be attacked by Israel in a process to completely eradicate them from the governance of Gaza, then they're ever more likely to hold on to those hostages as they act as those bargaining chips, and as we have seen, have kind of acted as a way to fearmonger the risk of Israeli airstrikes killing their own civilians, which are now being held hostage. And so that's kind of the issue for Israel, with the hostages being expected to be released in stages, and the talks could allow for as many as 50 civilians of the 240 hostages that we know have been taken by Hamas to be released. And this would be, a significant result of the out of the conflict so far. Obviously, the amount of death which has come with this conflict already, and understanding that the conflict will continue after, however many civilians have been released, is kind of a bit of a pessimistic sight in the face of, some more positive news. Now, Israel, as a result of, receiving these hostages, would seem to have to pause hostilities from 3 to 5 days and release 150 prisoners of its own. And now, this has been something that's been discussed, especially by Western leaders, in relation to the conflict at large. So, we have heard from Antony Blinken calling for temporary humanitarian pauses, which we could, see humanitarian aid flow into Gaza during these pauses within the conflict. And, as a result, it's interesting to see how now the US is getting kind of what it was calling for in those temporary pauses, which were more humanitarian focused, but in this way will be benefiting, Israel, in allowing Israel to receive its hostages. Now, IDF troops are now on the vicinity of the partly functioning Indonesian hospital, and this is one of the now few very large hospitals within Gaza. Obviously, we know that Al-Shifa Hospital has been, sieged by the IDF, as there was, suspected underground networks of Hamas bases underneath the hospital embedded. Certain military infrastructure was discovered already at the kind of at the hospital compound, and now fighting does seem to be taking place on the border of the Indonesian hospital within Gaza, with the IDF also fighting in the eastern parts of Gaza, with Hamas remaining inside. Now, this attack, into Gaza, of course, is following the October the 7th massacre, as we spoke about at the start, and has now reportedly killed over 10,000 civilians. So, great humanitarian impacts, very sad to see, of course. And this is something that we're likely to see continue as the war does, continue into now months, with skirmishes also on the Lebanon border continuing between the IDF and Hezbollah. And obviously that's been continuing from the start as well, with Hezbollah kind of vowing to kind of support Hamas. This obviously being a Shia militia group funded by Iran, far more powerful than Hamas, with lots more military kind of training and supplies, and has been engaging in skirmishes with the IDF, killing IDF soldiers and damaging IDF bases and that sort of thing, and we've seen these exchanges actually increase in intensity recently, sparking fears of escalation regionally. And this is in reference to what we were talking about at the start, with guided missiles recently being launched by Hezbollah. Obviously guided missiles having a much larger cost, and kind of referencing an increase in kind of tensions between the two kind of powers within the region. So keep your eyes on this. Next to talk about, though, is Jeremy Hunt in relation to the $9 billion a year permanent tax breaks for businesses. Now, Jeremy Hunt tomorrow, or today, it's today actually, sorry, it's Jeremy Hunt today will institute a £9 billion permanent tax break for businesses, and this comes as he makes his autumn budget statement in an attempt to stimulate business. Now, we know, as for the general UK's economic kind of summary and outlook, it has been looking pretty bleak coming out of COVID. Obviously, the finances were drained of the United Kingdom as a result of the high cost of COVID. The UK government sustained many individuals throughout that period, and as a result took a large hefty toll on its finances. As well as that, we've been experiencing austerity. So we've already had that kind of lack of financing of certain sectors, and so this has kind of exacerbated the issue, making the job for Jeremy Hunt far harder. But it does seem that despite the inflationary worries and issues, Jeremy Hunt is looking to provide permanent tax breaks for businesses in an effort to stimulate the economy, with Hunt looking to announce cuts to national insurance as well, including also 100 supply side reforms, with obviously this offering pushing the demand within the UK economy higher, which would push inflationary pressures even higher. But at the same time, we're hearing about these 100 supply side reforms, which obviously could bring less inflationary pressure to the economy. So that's something to note as well. Now, this is largely in response to the forecast of the British economy flatlining in 2024. And this is obviously what we were talking about at the start. The new tax scheme will allow companies to immediately deduct all of its spending on IT equipment or machinery from taxable profits. And obviously this is a policy often implemented in an effort to stimulate business, to allow businesses to run at lower costs, with having less of that profit kind of taken away through taxation. And this, according to Hunt, will give the UK one of the most generous capital allowance regimes, which could encourage not only business growth within the UK, but also business injections from outside the UK into the UK for new business creation, with the Office for Budget Responsibility projecting a boost in investment by 3% year on year, with Hunt freezing tax thresholds, allowing for a fiscal headroom for tax cuts of £25 billion. Now, cuts to national insurance are also expected in order to incentivise work and prove the Tories are serious on tax cuts. After all, the Tory party is a party which is supposed to represent itself as that party for low taxes, and at the moment we aren't seeing that. And so as we go into the election year of 2024, it does seem that Rishi Sunak and Jeremy Hunt are trying to reclaim that message that the Tories are the low tax party. With Sunak also saying he wanted to cut the 20p basic rate of income tax before the election, with this being expected to cost £7 billion a year if cut only by 1p. And that's what we're expecting, as that's what we've heard from Rishi Sunak. As for inflation, though, the Bank of England, Governor Andrew Bailey, did warn that markets were underestimating the persistence of UK inflation, which still stands at 4.6%, and has, inflation has affected especially Western economies greatly, and the UK very much so. But that's all to talk about in relation to the articles. Next to talk about, of course, is the charts. So firstly to talk about is US indices, with the US 30, as we can see here, starting to stall after that kind of bullish momentum that we did see going into the week. Now, on Monday, we did see kind of this push to the upside, breaking above this strong area of resistance and liquidity for the sell side, and breaking above that area. But it does seem that we were unable to reach this next area of liquidity that we did highlight, and is now price does seem to be kind of retesting this area of liquidity in an effort to gain the momentum it needs to continue a push to the upside. So it'd be interesting to see whether price does react to this liquidity level, as if it does, we are likely to see that strong push to the upside further. So keep your eyes on US indices. As well as that, we have the dollar to talk about, which has seen that kind of strong kind of bearish momentum following recent economic data from the US, with the most important obviously economic data release being that lower than expected inflation figure, which did kind of create the picture, which caused many individuals and market participants to begin expecting the Fed to reduce rates and cut rates earlier than previously expected, and that as a result caused that sell-off on the dollar, with people obviously holding money in the dollar to enjoy those high interest rates. But if they're expecting lower ones, then they might start pulling that money out and putting it into something like the stock market, which will receive the benefits of those lower interest rates. But yeah, it does seem the dollar is somewhat retracing on the bullish side. It'll be interesting to see then whether price can make its way back up to this strong area of resistance, on the charts, as it does line up with that 6180 Fibonacci area. So I would keep your eye on that level in particular. Next to talk about though is Euro USD. So still on the topic of the dollar, but yes, like the dollar seeing, bullish retracement, that is causing the euro to take, that kind of bearish retracement. It'll be interesting to see where price can make it down to. Obviously, we have these, prior areas of liquidity as a result of it, kind of price stalling there once before. So it'd be interesting to see whether price can tap that and continue a move to the upside, or it will come down even further and possibly even push into, these areas such as the 6180. But obviously that could be causing then a reversal in price action, as this would be breaking market structure. So keep your eyes on Euro USD. Next to talk about though is pound yen, which is in an interesting position after obviously, kind of seeing this kind of bearish kind of reversal in price, after we hit these highs up here around the 188.31 area. We did see that reversal in price, and now it's seemingly starting to make lower highs and lower lows, signaling a bearish price action move. We are also looking up for that head and shoulders pattern forming, as we can see here with the shoulders, the baseline, and now possibly shoulders over here. So keep your eyes on this. It'd be interesting though to see now whether, because price has tapped this area of liquidity a few times, whether price can now make a significant run to the upside. So keep your eyes on that. Next to talk about though is USD JPY, which, staying on the topic of the yen, is retracing to the bullish side. Now on USD JPY, we've been seeing a lot of volatility, and that strong push to the downside that we did see starting on the 13th of November has resulted in a bottoming out of the price, tapping into this area of bullish liquidity that we had located back here some time ago. So price tapped into that area and is now making a move to the upside. It'll be interesting to see where it then continues to the downside from. Obviously it's currently within this area of liquidity, but we have many areas of liquidity on USD JPY just as a result of the previous market structure that we have seen. So that's why it's important to keep note of on USD JPY as I declutter my very cluttered charts, which show the historical kind of areas of liquidity for price. Next to talk about though is gold, which has tapped that $2,000 an ounce mark yesterday, and has taken a bit of a bearish sell-off from that area. It did break a bit above that area, reaching around the 2007 mark, but is now sitting just below that $2,000 mark. So keep your eyes on that. I did note also over here that we are seeing a bearish divergence on the RSI, but obviously we've had this strong bullish momentum since we tapped that 3820 Fibonacci area for price. And this is an interesting thing to keep your eye on, of course. So keep your eyes on this. It'll be interesting to see whether in the long term we'll be able to push all the way up to reach this Fibonacci extension level around the 2064 mark. So keep your eyes on that. But that's all to talk about for the charts already. But next to talk about, of course, is the economic calendar, with some data coming out today, but some very important data, of course, to highlight. Now, firstly, we do have the French economic outlook figure coming out, so listen out for that. As well as that, and most importantly, arguably today, we do have the UK's autumn budget statement. Autumn budget statements, as a result of signalling the amount of kind of government borrowing that could occur within the coming years, and signalling the amount of business investment and the possible inflationary pressures within the economy. The UK autumn statement has great impact on gold, but especially on UK indices, as well as the pound, of course. So keep your eyes on this. As well as that, we do have US mortgage data coming out, along with US durable good orders data. Along with that, we will have the Eurozone consumer confidence flash bit of data coming out, along with US consumer sentiment figures coming. As well as that, we do have the Bank of Canada's governor having a speech today as well. As well as that, and finally, we will have Aussie manufacturing and services data flash as well. But that's all to talk about in reference to the economic calendar. We've covered a lot on the articles, also with lots on the economic calendar and charts covered as well. Hope you have a great trading day, but that's all from us at Wildwood Capital. Have a great one. See you later. Bye.